Welcome to the show today. I am very, very excited to introduce you to a woman who is known as the Godmother of Rock. She's rock royalty. She's my dear friend, and also I would have to say one of my biggest mentors in life. Her name is Nadine Condon. Welcome to the Connected Caroline Show.
I'm thrilled to be on the Connected Caroline show. I see this show doing such great things. And I know you've been working with, for years actually, in other media platforms, promoting nonprofits and social change. And I applaud all of your efforts, Caroline.
Oh, thank you. You really were. I called you the center of the universe for me, for the music industry. When I got really, I was in the music industry, but I went up a whole nother level when I met you and hooked on your coattails, and you were a wonderful mentor to me. And eventually dear friend, as we are, dear friend and sister. But we are here to talk about your new book. You are an author, and you have previously written a book to explain to young music people that want to get into the music scene what to do. What's that book? What's the title of that book?
My first book was called Hot Hits, Cheap Demos, The Real World Guide to Music Business Success. And I wrote it as a how-to manual for young musicians, but actually any creative people. It was really a how to express your creativity and learn, what kind of success do you really want? Because everybody thinks they want to be on the big stage, but really being on the big stage comes with a lot of sacrifice and a lot of compromise. And so it was successfully received. It was published on Backbeat Books in 2004.
Yeah, it was great. So now Nadine has recently published a memoir called Confessions, Stories to Rock Your Soul. And this memoir is really, as they should be, super personal, really raucous to read. It's the real deal. Nadine, why don't you tell us all about the inspiration of why you wanted to write it, why now, and how it feels to share all those stories.
I was compelled to write this book. I actually started writing individual stories about events in my life in the later 90s. The first story I actually wrote was about my mom dying. And then I started writing stories about hospice patients. But then I realized that I needed to put rock and roll stories in there too. The spirit, there's a lot of talk about the spirit in this book. My book covers a wide arc. I say it goes from debauchery to the divine. And that's what I think is the human experience. And I wrote it as honestly as possible because I thought I had something to say and a special way of saying it. So my book is really two books in one. The first half is all the rock stories, which everyone wants to hear about. They want to go behind the scenes. And it's about my coming of age in San Francisco, my spiritual home. And then the second half of the book is about more adult subjects, hospice patients, the loss of family members. I confront my own personal trauma from the past. I have a lot of reconciliation. And I think I try to end the book in a way that encourages people to step through their own fears. Because I feel like people feel like they're not enough. They can't handle difficult situations. But I'm here to tell them that you can step through your fears and do the work that you were meant to do here on earth.
Beautifully said. What is one of the things that this book has done to help you step through another fear, like by just bearing your soul in this book? What is
Well, it was quite it's really, I was very afraid of being so honest. I wasn't afraid of being honest in the book, but being so honest was very revealing. And when someone has suffered violent trauma, it's the revelation of such that is so scary because you feel like it's your own fault. You did something to cause it. You're a lesser person. People will look at you differently. People will judge you. Mm-hmm. And people have said, oh, it must have been very cathartic to write this book and talk about your own rape in college and how you had to spend a lifetime overcoming those fears, it really wasn't that cathartic. It was something I felt I had to do because I know that I was a personality in San Francisco. As I write, I was a I was a minor league celebrity in a major league town. But when people look at a successful person, they wouldn't imagine that I had suffered the after effects of trauma for actually my entire adult life. And I needed them to see that sexual trauma is not just something you read about in the newspaper. It's something that happens to all of us. And as RAINN.org, which is the rape and incest and sexual abuse site, says 1 in 6 women will be sexually assaulted. But I also did not want to make it a Me Too book or a book about rape. I wanted it to be an adult person's journey through life. And I started as a hippie in the Bassett Salon in 1971. And then I went to backpacked in Europe by myself in 1971. And then I had this sexual assault at gunpoint, and also in the fall of 1971. So that was a pivotal year. 50 years later, I'm finally able to write this book. All the fun stuff, the rock and roll, how I dealt with it, and then how my life changed when I found I wanted to do more meaningful work in hospice.
Right. We'll get to that, because you've had multiple North Stars, I think.
Yes.
Right. One was music. And then you discovered your love for hospice, which, even we were together when you decided to. I remember you saying, I think I'm done with the music business and I'm going to do something else. And at the time I was like, I got it. I understood. But hospice was such a departure because you also kept that very private, and you do that, you were testing the waters for yourself before you, in my opinion, before you really revealed to the, all of your inner, your layers of circles of people, what you were doing. And you've never been happier. I mean, you really found a second home there, a third home, maybe.
I say I've only had 2 work passions in my life: rock and roll and hospice. And literally, I've only had 2 jobs, 2 careers in my life: rock and roll and hospice. And it's so funny because, I worked with the legendary Grace Slick for 10 years from 1979 to 1989 with the Jefferson Starship, and then they became the Starship. And Grace was a bigger than life icon, and really the sex symbol for a generation. And I remember when I worked with her, she's a little bit older than I was. And I was into the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll part of the music business. And she was not. She was clean and sober at that time. And she lived a very quiet life off stage. She hadn't begun her painting career yet, but, she lived quietly. I couldn't understand. I thought, people think she's so wild. She's so boring. Meanwhile, I'm out trying to kill myself with sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the guise of, boy, aren't we having fun? But I found when I too hit my 50s that all the things that pull us into rock and roll in our 20s no longer have the same meaning. I had found a good man. We had married. My life was stable. I had been in therapy. I, put a lot of demons to rest. And I found I really did want something more meaningful than just helping, young musicians, how to become rock stars. And it was happenstance that I got involved in hospice. Actually, I just saw a small piece in the newspaper that looking for volunteers, and I drove their white knuckle, clenching their steering wheel. Sure, I was going to a death cult. I knew nothing about it.
You write that in the book, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually didn't properly introduce you with your rock royalty. Why don't you take us through, your career in the music industry?
I had a wonderful.
Explain it in the book, yeah.
Sure, I am just very fortunate. I would happen to be in the right place at the right time in many situations. And I first started working in the business with the fabulous Nick Gravenites, and he's in his 80s now. But at the time, he was like the godfather of rock and roll in San Francisco. He was a blues man from Chicago, a white blues man, and he and his best friends, Paul Butterfield and Michael Bloomfield, really created the white blues movement in America because they played with the legendary Black blues musicians in Chicago, who people like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, they took these white kids under their wings because these white kids really did want to really try to be like them. And they did. The Paul Butterfield Blues Band was really one of the first integrated blues bands in America. And Nick wrote their signature song, Born in Chicago. And then he came west and
Actually, can I interject here? Let's make a mention of that incredible documentary that
Born in Chicago.
Born in Chicago that came out last year. I saw it, I guess, from the Mill Valley Film Festival. It is excellent, and it explains this whole story that Nadine's talking about. So Born in Chicago, check it out. It's a great documentary made by friends of ours. And
it really is,
yeah.
because it really, there's so much of that footage is, archival, and we'll never have those times again. Nick was best friends with Janis Joplin, wrote many of her songs, produced a couple of albums, and wrote Buried Alive in the Blues. When I met him, he was semi-retired and kind of counseling other musicians, but he had produced the early Quicksilver Messenger Service. He had written songs for Brewer and Shipley. He produced One Toke Over the Line, Sweet Jesus. He wrote for Pure Prairie League. I mean, lots of people covered his songs. And through him, I got into the business. And then through a friendship with Pete and Jeanette Sears, and Pete was the bass and keyboardist of the Jefferson Starship, when I was yearning to have a bigger stage in the music business, and I got a job in the management company of Jefferson Starship and as a publicist, but then it morphed into many other roles, including tour promotion and dealing with the record label. And basically by the end of my tenure with them, I was like the go-to person. If you wanted to talk to the band, Grace Slick or Mickey Thomas or Craig Chiquiso or any of the members, I arranged everything. And then after, I knew after Grace Slick left the band that I thought the band their career would come to a natural close. I started my own consulting business, and I started doing BMI showcases. BMI is a performing rights organization that collects monies for musicians when their songs are played on the radio, TV, bars, nightclubs. And I started doing showcases of unsigned bands. And, the bands now, Counting Crows, Third Eye Blind, Stroke 9, and Candlebox. And I did them in San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and LA, and I became famous for that. Toward the end of the 90s, I decided to start my own music festival, Nadine's Wild Weekend, which is when we had the good fortune to meet. And that was an extravaganza of Northern California bands playing across venues in San Francisco, and it got a lot of publicity. We started small, 70 bands, and then like 8 clubs, and we ended up with 140 bands and 25 venues, and it became a huge civic celebration. I really wanted to give back to the city of San Francisco because it had meant so much to me when I moved here and wanted to be part of it. But toward the end of Nadine's Wild Weekend is when I wrote my book for musicians, Hot Hits, Cheap Demos, and then I was doing music seminars for musicians around the country, that I just had this nagging feeling that there was more out there for me. And it didn't make sense at the time because everyone thought I was on top of the world, but I knew that I needed more. And I began as a hospice volunteer in 1999, and I was still very active in the music business, and I continued to be active in the music business until late 2004. And I took actually a paid position at my small community hospice. And then that one thing led to another. And in 2006, I put the music business behind me and was completely 100% devoted to my hospice work. Now I've had many, you know, and we'll talk about the hospice later, but in my rock and roll career, it was as fulfilling as it could be. I loved mentoring young bands. I love being in the mix of things. Went to all the big time music events. I went to the Grammys for 20 straight years. And, I was just really embedded.
Amazing career, Nadine. Amazing.
I,
You've
I'm very,
helped. Go ahead.
well, I'm just very proud. I have 13 gold and platinum records from a variety of different clients, and that's what makes me really happy. And some of those clients, besides the Starship, were Melissa Etheridge, who I really helped break on her first couple albums. I was involved with her and the Island record label from day one. In fact, recently when I was moving, I found a demo tape that Island had sent me of her first album and the song Bring Me Some Water, and I just laughed to myself. It was on a cassette.
Of course it was. Of course it was. And for those of you who are not watching the YouTube interview, Nadine's got several gold and silver or platinum, I guess that is, records behind her, and very storied, wonderful, generous career in the music business. Your generosity was extraordinary. It's something about where I was thinking about how your hospice and your love for helping unsigned bands and kind of the underdog, like after you had this career, you start at the top with the Jefferson Starship, and then you decide that you want more of a challenge, because I know you, and you're going to help baby bands make it. And that's exactly what you did. And that's a generous heart. That's
yes, I say I'm the only person that started at the top and went downhill. I went from limos and first class down to, smelly nightclubs.
Yeah.
And 20-year-olds. And I mean, and I did love it. I've always liked being a mentor, and I've always enjoyed teaching. And so, somehow I was able to cobble together those two things, that really worked. And I had so much experience in the music business. And of course, businesses don't tell you the truth. I mean, okay, take, for example, a young band. If you see your favorite artist, you think, oh my goodness. But though their success was 10 years in the making.
Oh yeah, you said you're the one that coined that for me, and I have repeated that 1,000 times. Oh yeah, 10-year overnight success that band is.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right.
And everybody, any artist is like that. They've been noodling around and trying to make it for 10 years usually. It's usually about that long.
It's really true. It doesn't matter if they have been, whether you're a painter, a writer, songwriter, a performer, any type of creativity. It's really hard work and steady effort. That's what.
And hard to get noticed, because there's so much clutter. I mean, there really is, to get. I like your point about what your first book was about, was really defining for yourself what type of success you like, because once you go to those next levels, you have to start compromising. You have to start morphing into what is commercially successful. And a lot of that's really a mind blow for a lot of it used to be. I mean, people understand that sort of
it's a lot different now today.
Business now, and the business is very different now. But you've got all these artists on Spotify, but yet only 3 of them out of the 30 billion are making a living on Spotify.
Well, and that is just not. I mean, this is a total digression, but the industry today, musicians, Spotify is just one of so many platforms that simply do not pay creative people enough for their creativity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really not fair. There's no way. In 20 years, the difference is, I'm not sure I could do Nadine's Wild Weekend today, only because I incorporated local radio, local record stores,
labels,
local alternative newspapers, and we all worked together with the musicians to create this event. Now there are no local alternative newspapers. There are
Right.
no record stores except for, mom and pop independent stores. And actually are not so many terrestrial radio stations, or if they are, they, have very low numbers. So you can't really rely on them for the same
Correct.
impact. So I find it much harder, but creativity will always find a way. And so when, I talk about, I always had counseled musicians to find alternative economic income streams, because, there are lots of ways to think outside the box. And whether that is just getting your friends together for a backyard concert, which we've seen a mutual friend of ours do very successfully. I think people are hungry for community right now. The world is so chaotic, and so we're bringing everything down to the smallest, our community first, our family, our friends, and then where we live. And then if you have the energy and the wherewithal, you can expand your efforts out of that. But it's really having the ripple effect of moving outward, because there's too much going on out there in the big world. So you have to bring it down to something you can control and feel comfortable with.
I think that's like why the personal development world is taken off again, and people are doing that same, metaphorically speaking, the same thing going within. And really, it starts with you, and you start at home, and you start with your family, and then you go, layer by layer. You actually just said it perfectly, but a lot of people are doing that with their own self, with their selves, which is really great, because people are evolving and getting more connected to whatever they consider their spirit guides are, whether it's God or the ocean, and whatever it may be, they're connecting to that, and that inner voice and the higher self and everything. I think that's really been a positive fallout from COVID is people have gone within and have made some significant changes. I see it all around me.
I do think that was positive. COVID is here for a reason, not just to kill people, but to make us slow down and take stock of the directions we've been hurtling toward without rhyme or reason, just for profits and more profits.
Correct.
And, more higher numbers, more percentages, when is that going to end? When the earth is just a little crispy critter. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that I know that has occurred. Now it's a matter of, seeing what the next few years bring us, and hopefully beautiful things, because people have shifted their perception.
I really think that the majority of people, speaking just for the United States, I think we're more in sync than the media makes it out to be.
I agree.
80% believe in abortion rights. 80%, 80% plus want common sense, reasonable gun controls. No one needs automatic weapons.
Right.
I think we're much more in sync, and I'm hoping that there will be a catalyst that brings us more together, and this impasse, which is strictly political, power and money based, will, be put aside for the common good and bipartisan work.
And how agreed. So, hospice. I've started to do a comparison of of the music business and then hospice. You are embracing and nurturing people at the beginning of their careers, of their dream, right? To become musicians. Now you are nurturing people at the end of life. And that's beautiful too, because that's a whole, that I see a parallel there. Or am I off?
I don't think so. Well, but there is the nurturing aspect. And I will say that, live music was always my thing. I love live music. Yeah. Going and watching a band record in the studio is like watching paint dry. Hated every minute of it. But live music, because what attracted me to live music was the immediacy of it. That note, the way the band plays that song, the atmosphere of the crowd, that's never going to be repeated ever again. It's immediate and unique.
Wait, listen to Nadine, because she told me that, and I've never forgotten that. Every live show is an original work of art that will never be duplicated. And it's true, even if they play the same set list
right,
over and
every
over and
night
over again,
for 40
everybody's
years.
vibe is different every single night, and it
The
comes out.
hall, how they're feeling on
Yeah,
stage.
yeah, the
Well,
crowd
that,
makes a huge difference. I
you
love
know,
it too. That's my like
yeah, thanks.
gold too, is live shows and watching
Well,
anyone play live.
surprisingly to me, I found out that same immediacy and vulnerability in a live show, because the musicians are putting themselves out there and the crowd is too, because it's a give and take in a live concert between the crowd and the musician. I found those same things in hospice, the immediacy of being with someone who has a life-limiting disease, because you know the time is limited. So you act immediately. Your relationship is completely present. And it was the immediacy and vulnerability of my clients in hospice that I related to, because that was not so different to me than, touring. But it was, touring, I mean, live music, it's a big situation. This was a one-on-one situation, and it really did speak to me. I think I was strictly, I obviously was looking for a place to use my nurturing capabilities in a situation that I thought might be more effective and more adult. When I wrote the book, my husband read my first draft and he says, man, the first half is so much fun, all those rock stories. And then he goes, the second half is adult. It's okay, it's adult. And so then I knew I had to actually keep rewriting it to incorporate them so that you could see the journey and see the arc and see that it made sense. And I think I did that in the finished product, because people are not shying away from either the hospice stories, or I write about the death of my mom and reconciling with my dad over an emotional situation. And, people are not shying away from those stories. In fact, those are the stories that are affecting them the most.
Right. Because they can probably relate to those stories more than this high flying rock and roll Jefferson Starship lifestyle, which is, fantasy for most people.
Well, it's funny because I'm hearing from a lot of contemporaries, women my age, that were not in the business, who are writing me going, boy, was your life in the 20s different than my life? I was married with 2 kids, blah, blah, blah. And I go, yeah, I lived for all of us.
Yeah, I got married at 40 for the same reason. My 30s were not about getting married and having babies, because I was with you.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We were living large.
Living large, having fun. Oh, Nadine Condon, you are the best. Oh,
well, I've been, just fortunate. I am just grateful that I have continued to follow the spirit in my life. And, I didn't know what the spirit was. I didn't know how to trust my instinct. I didn't know how to follow those nudges that you get. We always know if we're doing something wrong or something right. You can deny it all you want, but you're going to feel that little pinprick. And I didn't know how to trust that. I did not understand that that was the beneficent power that was working on my behalf to guide me, protect me, show me. And that's something I really am hoping the book, and I've heard this from people, that is making them think about their own relationship to the bigger world, the universe, the God question, God, Buddha. We don't,
higher
the
spirit,
redwoods,
whatever the
the
higher power
ocean.
is.
Yeah, whatever. That's right. That's exactly right. And I think we need to talk about it more, not less.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, as because I write this in the book, I think that the fundamentalists and the evangelists, the evangelicals, have kidnapped Christianity and ruined it for the rest of us, because, whoever you use as your spiritual avatar is going to be a positive influence in your life.
Most definitely. Most definitely. And, as we get older, you realize that inner voice, if you're not listening, they'll tap harder and louder. because you're to guide you in the direction that
Well,
you're
you
supposed to
know,
go.
the story of meeting my husband is the perfect case
The
in point with
perfect.
that, because I met my husband, who is referred to as Honey.
We love honey.
I met Honey at a Kentucky Derby party in 1984 in San Francisco. Now, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. My dad was a big deal with the Kentucky Derby Festival, one of the early supporters and founders. And we went to the Derby, and it was a big deal. I mean, for people from Louisville, Kentucky, the Kentucky Derby is a high holiday.
That's
So
what we
it's
call
like,
it.
yeah, exactly. So this guy I met at this party was also from Louisville, and I immediately disliked him. He was 6 years younger. I thought he was arrogant and, too bold. And I just was like, ooh, who would like that guy? And of course, at that time, I was in my early 30s. I wanted to, or whatever. And I wanted to older men, not these younger men. And then we met again 2 years later, and through the same mutual friend, Billy. And then and I liked him so much better, except he liked the wrong sports team. And that was a black mark in my book. I was
That made me
shocked.
laugh.
And
In the
then
book.
2 years after that, we met at a show I was producing. Same friend, Billy, brought him to the show. And that's when God tapped me on the shoulder hard, exactly what you referred to. I can remember it. God tapped me on the shoulder and said, go back and talk to that guy. And finally, I listened, and I did. And I turned around and went back and started a conversation, and then invited him to my private table. And then that's how it all started. And we both use that. We both tell the same story about that. And I can still feel the tap on my shoulder, because the Spirit knows more than we do. We can't in our humanness understand the big picture. So, but Caroline, there was another situation that happened with that I talk about in the book, where I found a Super Bowl ring and returned it to its rightful owner.
Amazing story, people. You got to read the book just for that one story.
Well, I was a friend of Mark Davis, and I'm still a friend of Mark Davis, who now owns the Raiders. But in the 80s, his dad owned the Raiders, and his ring had been his first Super Bowl win in '76, had been stolen from his house in Southern California after the team moved there for a few years. And I found a guy wearing it backstage at the Jefferson Starship show in Lake Tahoe. And I confronted the man, and then I arranged for the ring to be returned I set up a meeting at the Rock Mansion in San Francisco and arranged the handover. But that was the same thing. There was no way a person would know that was Mark Davis's Super Bowl ring on the man's hand. I knew it was a Raiders ring, but who knew?
But you just came out and said, is that Mark Davis's ring?
Yes.
And the guy's like, yeah.
Like someone else was, some spirit. And that really was my first inkling that maybe I could trust this instinctive, this feeling, this spirit, this voice. I didn't even know what to call it, but I did it, and it had such a positive result. And then so that was really the beginning for me of turning my life around, actually, and trying to find what grounded me more, so I could really go deeper and explore what was more meaningful to me. And that's why when I left the Starship, that actually an incident like that had helped give me the confidence to trust myself that I can go out on my own. I can run my own business. I can have a staff. I can work with multiple people. I don't have to be limited to this one small area.
Beautifully said. Yeah, what great lessons.
And for people that want to see,
there's the ring.
Here's the ring. So Mark Davis, this is woman's companion pendant. It's a face of the ring, 27 diamonds. And it's Mark Davis gave this to me out of love and appreciation for finding and returning his ring.
So we have to
There
wrap
are
up.
so many stories.
I
There
know.
are so many stories in the book for people to read. And I really encourage them. I think it speaks to everyone. I mean, this is a wide open book. I want people to share the love. I want people to know that they're enough to step through their fears. And it's never too late, because as I write, I went to my 50th high school reunion, gave a talk, and the response was so incredible. I realized I had to write this book. And that's when it really started in May, June of 2019. And by the time I came home, I had an outline. And then, I went to work.
There you go. There you go. Following your passion.
Yeah.
I love that. This book, Confessions, Stories to Rock Your Soul, Nadine Condon. Pick it up, buy it on Amazon, right?
Right. You can buy it on Amazon. It's there for everybody. There's hard, the printed copy, and there's also a Kindle electronic version for people that like to read in other formats.
Are you going to do an audio where you narrate? You'd be great.
That's a great idea. And you and I can talk about that later, because I am a boomer and hence need help with social media and all these ways. The book is on McCall Books, but it's basically an independent self-published book under the aegis of this a small boutique publisher who does nothing but help me put together, and I'm responsible for the rest. So I want to spread the love. Word of mouth will sell this book.
Definitely. It's something for everybody. And if you've ever wanted to be in the music business as a female and want to know how wild it was back in the days before really people were like measuring line iteming things, and it was sort of a free-for-all, Nadine's book definitely shows the wild fun sides of the music business.
And it also shows how you can transition to become your most authentic self. You're never too old to do that, and it's never too late.
That's a great way to close, because you're never too old to reinvent yourself. And you did a massive reinvention from rock and roll godmother to hospice, angel. And I think a lot of people, again, COVID drove a lot of people that are in their 50s to say, hey, I want something else. I want more peace and quality of life, and they're reinventing themselves right now. And that's part of why these podcasts are all springing up, because it's, we've got something to share.
Right.
It doesn't have to fit into a cookie cutter of a network, what they want. So, or a record label or a movie studio. People can be very authentic and get their own energy out there. So,
and even if it's just privately, you can do that, because you don't have to follow the gang. If you feel called to volunteer with a passion, or to return to church, or to start meditating, or to be more kind, it's not about making it a career. It's about feeding your soul, and that's the bottom line.
Oh, what wonderful advice, Nadine. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for
Caroline.
Thank you for coming on. I love you, my sister. You look great. I know you just got back from Hawaii. Real quick, how was the trip?
The aloha spirit is alive and well. It's a wonderful state. So God bless the Hawaiians. Mahalo.
Mahalo. I was going to mahalo.
Yeah.
And everyone, aloha, mahalo. This is Caroline with Connected Caroline. Thanks for listening and watching. Make it a giving day.